Good morning, Saints. Well, I'm just going to keep tracking here with the harvest, barley harvest theme. Um, for the new people on the channel here, it's been kind of a progression as we've been going through the Bible and hopefully correctly uncovering the two early feasts of the Lord. We're looking at the barley harvest, the wheat harvest, but then hopefully the Lord showing us the context that maybe solves a lot of biblical interpretation problems. I'm not putting it out there that we got it nailed. I'm just saying I think maybe the Lord showed us some stuff here that makes the scenario a better fit. But I think it would be prideful to go beyond a statement like that. Well, today I wanted to address something which I mentioned last year at this time, but now this year, I think it's really it needs to come back around again, and I really appreciate Sister Dana or Dan, I apologize, I don't know which way you pronounce that, who brought it up again to me, saying that the second Passover, what does that have to do with the time we're in? And so let's go take a look at a couple of things. One, reiterate some things that people have been discounting, I think, a little bit in the Bible in terms of the first month. Then we'll look at the second Passover, and then we'll try and tie some things in which are occurring, and that's kind of today's video. Okay, so here we are in Exodus 13, and this part I just wanted to drill in on the biblical calendar. There's a lot of people that pop into Google when's Passover and they get April 22nd back or something like that, because what comes back is the current rabbinical calendar. And I just wanted to kind of set the record straight a little bit, and this is complicated, so anybody that thinks they have this nailed, I think needs to have some humility too, because there's lots of debate about how to get back to the original biblical calendar. And I think in large part, this is part of Satan's plan to hide or mask the time we're living in so that people are caught off guard, like we see there in 1 Thessalonians 5. But just for context, the current biblical calendar comes from a calculated method. I think they use this notion of leap months because the Jewish system in the Bible commands the Israelis, but I'm going to say Jewish as a more common reference, to use the moon to define the first of the month. And so you go from new moon to new moon to new moon, and new moon is even a little bit of a debate, especially in the secular world, but biblically, in the way it had been observed historically, is when you see the first sliver of the moon appearing for the next lunar cycle. But I believe this is true. If you just go 12 lunar months, you end up with a 354-day year, something like that, less than 365. And so then you've got the problem of 10, 11 days drift every year off of the actual cycle. What do you do? And I think it's the what do you do part that is still left for a little interpretation. But we'll look at some passages in the Bible, but they depend on being in Israel and spotting both the new moon and then looking at the crop, and we'll demonstrate that is in the Bible. what happened though is in the time frame of 70 AD in particular, and definitely after the full diaspora has occurred at 135 AD, the Israelis were dispersed, basically to every nation on earth at that point. The second diaspora is how people talk about it. And the being outside of the land of Israel, then forced everybody to say, well, how do we spot this moon? Because if it was an overcast day in Israel to spot the new moon, you would push to the next day to then say, okay, we're in the next month, right? And so if they're not in the land of Israel, they can't look at the crop, they can't spot the new moon the way they should. And so they came up with a calculated method, which is what the rabbis use today, where they add this additional month 7 times, I think, in 13 years or something like that. So what the rabbis are looking at is, could be right in a given year or might be wrong because they're using this mathematical formula. And in the case of this current year, many people suspect it is wrong. They added the month this year. They think Passover is April 22nd. You can make a pretty strong argument that the barley was ripe in the condition of Abib at the right time of year. The new moon occurred, and actually the equinox occurred in time for the Passover. All those things appeared to be there for March. So however you'd reckon correcting for the drift, we may not have drifted so far as to not have Passover happen in the month of March. And if it wouldn't have happened in the month of March, yes, you would have to correct it then and push it to April. But it appeared like all the conditions were in place for it to be in March. But that's as strong of a statement as you can make, I think, because the Israelites aren't practicing biblical calendaring anymore, and so are we off, are we on, who knows. That's where we'll leave that. Now, the next thing is there's debate. The Bible does say in Genesis, the sun, moon, and stars were for reckoning time, seasons and appointed times and all that. So yes, they use the lunar month biblically looking at the moon, but the drift and how it gets corrected for, I think, is where the debate can lie. And is that where you would use the equinox because of the sun in relation to using the sun, moon, and stars, or do you use the crop cycle, which some people are debating? I just want to show you in Scripture where you get the crop angle to this thing. Not that this is right or wrong, but it just demonstrates this is a way you could correct for the drift that could be biblical here. So Exodus 13, 1 through 4, the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, Sanctify unto me all the firstborn, whatever shall open the womb among the children of Israel, both man and of beast, it is mine. And Moses said unto the people, Remember this day in which you came out of Egypt, out of the house of bondage, for by strength of hand the Lord brought you out from this place, and there shall no leavened bread be eaten. This day you came out in the month of Abib. And so there's the word people wonder about. And Abib here in Strong's is from an unused root, meaning tender, green, that is a young ear of grain, hence the name month of Abib or Nisan. And it's a condition, if you drill into it further, it's a ripening condition of the barley harvest in this first month. And Abib is Nisan, it's the first month of the year. And so that's where you get this angle of the crop has to be in this condition of partially ripened. And it also has to do with the way the grain offerings were done then starting at this point of the year. And I'm not going to get into that any further, but let's just go down, check a few others so you see this isn't just a one-off interpretation. Let's take a look at Exodus 23, 15, and 16. Scroll it here. Thou shalt keep the feast of unleavened bread. Thou shalt eat unleavened bread 7 days as I commanded thee in the time appointed of the month of Abib. For in it thou came out from Egypt, and none shall appear before me empty. And the feast of harvest, the first fruits of thy labor, which thou hast sown in the field, and the feast of ingathering, which is at the end of the year, when thou hast ingathered thy labors out of the field. 3 times in a year all thy males shall appear before the Lord. So there you get a little definition of at these harvest times is when the Lord is going to have all the males appear before him. And so that's where they had the sojourning back to Jerusalem. That's why there was people from all different nations there at the day of Pentecost, because they were actually celebrating that second harvest, the wheat, first fruits of the wheat harvest, which, to the Jewish folks would have been Shavuot, but, we call it Pentecost, same day. Okay, so there's that. Now let's keep going down here. This just reinforcing here, 34:18. The feast of unleavened bread shalt thou keep. 7 days thou shalt eat unleavened bread as I commanded thee in the time of the month of Abib. For in the month of Abib thou camest out of Egypt. Okay, so it's just nailing that first month tied to that harvest schedule, okay? That's why people look at this. Now, Deuteronomy 16:1. Observe the month of Abib, and Deuteronomy is dual. It's a repeating and a summary of the law being given. Observe the month of Abib, and keep the Passover unto the Lord thy God. For in the month of Abib, the Lord thy God brought thee forth out of Egypt by night. So I think you get the hint there. Why do people think about that barley harvest being in a certain condition, tying it to the first month of the year? It's for this reason. Now, is this the way God intended for the calendar to be corrected? I think you could put that up for debate, but it certainly appears like if you're going to, the offering that's given from all the people that come in with their first fruits is a sheaf of barley that was designated as the first ripen of the field, and then the high priest holds that sheaf up over his head as the first fruits during the the offering. And so this is the beginning. You can't have the wave offering if the barley wasn't ripe. Okay, so it doesn't really matter how you want to look at it. That's basically gives you a pretty good anchor for what is the first month of the year. If it was too early and the barley wasn't ripe, you're not doing the wave offering. So, I think it's a candidate for the thing that corrects the calendar if you say the lunar year is short of 365 and a quarter days. Okay, so now let's go to the second Passover, which I talked about last year at this time, but the sister in the Lord brought this up again, and I think maybe there is something compelling here. It wheels around my brain, and I don't want to overread this, but the Lord put everything in the Bible for a purpose. And this one, on the surface text, yeah, it has a purpose. What was the issue? They came out of Egypt. They're at Mount Sinai. The Passover was coming up, I think, in the second year now, basically a year after coming out. And certain people had buried a dead body, would have been ceremonially unclean I think you had to have a week away from the camp or something after you buried a body. So they would have been ceremonially unclean to celebrate the Passover that, the Lord had just commanded them to keep in the prior year. And so these folks that came to Moses said, "What should we do?" Moses took it before the Lord. And here's where we are in Numbers 9. "And the Lord spake unto Moses in the wilderness of the Sinai in the first month of the second year after they came out of the land of Egypt, saying, Let the children of Israel also keep the Passover at his appointed season. In the 14th day of the month at even ye shall keep it for its appointed season, according to all the rites of it, according to all the ceremonies thereof, shall ye keep it. And Moses spake unto the children of Israel that they should keep the Passover. And they kept the Passover on the 14th day of the first month, even in the wilderness of the Sinai, according to all that the Lord commanded Moses. So did the children of Israel. And there were certain men who were defiled by a dead body of a man, that they could not keep the Passover on that day. And they came before Moses and Aaron on that day. And those men said unto him, We are defiled by the dead body of the man, wherefore we are kept back, that we may not offer an offering of the Lord in its appointed season among the children of Israel. And Moses said unto them, Stand still, and I will hear what the Lord will command concerning you. And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Speak to the children of Israel, saying, If any man of you or your posterity shall be unclean by reason of a dead body. I think this posterity thing, meaning descendant, is interesting. Or being journey far off, you shall keep the Passover unto the Lord. The 14th day of the second month, even they shall keep it, and eat it with unleavened bread and bitter herbs. They shall leave none of it until the morning, nor break any bone of it, according to all the ordinances of the Passover. They shall keep it. But the man that is clean and not on a journey, and forbeareth to keep the Passover, even the same soul shall cut off from among his people, because he brought not the offering of the Lord in its appointed season. Man should bear his sin. Okay, let's cut her off there. So that's all we're really given. And there's a couple of examples of the second Passover in the Bible. I probably should have gone back and studied them all out. But long story short, they were defiled by a dead body, so they missed the Passover. Well, just, in type, an allegory or pattern, at the real fulfillment of Passover, Christ's crucifixion on the cross, that was a defiling, right? That was a defiling of the Jewish people. I'm just trying to point out, is this a type and shadow of the reason for the second Passover is because during the first Passover, the Jewish people of the day were the ones that crucified Christ and caused the dead body. And now we're coming up to this time, and here let's just look on the calendar. Again, this is mostly speculation, saints. I mean, this pattern's here for a reason. I don't know if I'm on to, if the Lord showed me the reason or not, but, of course, a month after what we believe is the real Passover from biblical, not from a calculated calendar. So I'm here on Torah calendar looking at what they also agree is the second month of the year, which, this is the month of April from a Gregorian calendar. Okay, so a month after the potential real Passover is the second Passover. And of course, what day is it landing on? It's landing on the day that the current Jewish rabbis are thinking is the Passover day. And why is this all significant? It's because the Passover was a chance to be covered from their sin. Well, they caused the dead body during the first coming of Christ, And now they're coming into the second Passover, and they're going to be given a choice again. You know, just like the first one, are they going to choose Barabbas, or are they going to choose Jesus as the one that gets released? Well, what decision do the Jews have coming up right in front of us? Let's just pretend this is the year the church is about to go. If we track with the book of Revelation, what's the first thing that happens on the first seal? The appearance of the Antichrist. Now, the Jews are going to be forced to choose the Antichrist as Messiah, which according to Daniel 9:27, many do, or choose Jesus as the Messiah, which happens. And I didn't plan on doing this, but let's do it anyways. Revelation 7. Here's the sealing of the 144,000. Okay, and what does it mean here to be sealed? They were a great multitude. Oh, sorry, I skipped on past. Okay, they were all sealed, 144,000. And then in Revelation 14, and I looked, and lo, I stood on Mount Zion, and with them 144,000 having his Father's name written in their forehead. Well, is that the sealing that we saw there in 7? And I heard a voice from heaven, many waters, a voice of great thunder, and the harps harping with their harps. And they sung, as it were, a song before the throne, before the 4 beasts and elders. No man could learn but the song of the 144,000, which were redeemed, resurrected maybe, from the earth. These are they which were not defiled with women. They are virgins, they which follow the Lamb wheresoever he goes. So, boom, there you get the the context. A bunch of the Jewish people are going to choose the Antichrist as Messiah, at least until the midpoint of the tribulation. But you have right away in Revelation 7 a bunch that aren't. And so maybe the second Passover is a marker or an indicator. Here, Jewish people, is the second chance. Are you going to choose your Barabbas again, the Antichrist in type and shadow, or are you going to choose the real Messiah? And we see both as going to occur. So that's currently what I'm making of the second Passover. I think it's very interesting given this year, but you know, if we're still here in a year and I'm still looking at the second Passover, you know, I can't be sure. We don't know. I just want to show you a couple other things. So, you know, this coming of the Antichrist is a really interesting thing, and it's getting more interesting all the time. I'd ask you to come here and see, you know, my brother here, Informed Christians, just put out this video last night, I guess, Triumphal Palm Entry. What I love about it is he's been tracking the same thing, the harvest and all that, and he does a much better job, especially with the graphics, taking a look at the celestial. But now, when you come down to this arch of Baal that's being set up, he drilled into that last night, and I think that was really good work. He said there's actually 2 arches to that structure that they blew up in Palmyra, Syria. There was a triumphal entry gate, and then there was the actual Arch of Baal, which was the entry into the worship center. And the triumphal entry gate is the thing being set up on April 19th in Trafalgar Square. The arch that would enter the worship center of Baal is the one that's going to get mass produced, but those will be set up later, is what he's come to. So I really appreciate that work, because the triumphal entry of Baal is what? It's probably the coming of the Antichrist. And so here's that fork in the road that I think the Jewish people are going to face. If you haven't accepted Christ, we know there's a day coming, and I think very, very soon, where the Christians that have accepted Christ fully go in the rapture. You're the barley harvest. Now you got the wheat harvest coming. You got Jews that need to make a choice. the second choice? Are they going to, go with the Barabbas, or are they going to go with Jesus? And I think the defiling of the dead body was just a hint there in the second Passover. So he gets into this. He describes those two arches. I think that really fits. Now, this is a little bit more conjecture, but I've talked about this Steve Olson's channel. He keeps looking at these images sent in from all over the world and from the All Skycam network. He certainly is seeing and demonstrating some very, very strange things. Now, is he looking at this Nibiru Nemesis system coming in? I think the guy is probably taking some withering abuse from people, and I know what that's like by putting this stuff out there. But boy, there sure is a body of evidence of something that appears to be up there. And so set aside disbelief. It's easy to mock, right? It's hard to buck the system and to say, hey, I think there's something here. So regardless of what we're seeing, I give the brother tons of credit for just sticking both feet in there and saying, hey, what if it is this? And, like I say, hundreds and hundreds of photos now that he's got that show, both from the International Space Station, the all Skycams, photos coming in from all around the world. It just appears that there is a system, there is a bluish kind of a planet and a reddish planet with a cloud around it, and he shows it from a bunch of angles. And so, okay, what is it? Is it the blue Kachina, the Hopi prophecy, whatever you want to say? Biblically, I think something like that, making a close approach to Earth, makes sense for the Revelation 6 sixth seal and for what you see in Revelation 8. But there is history, and you don't need to be a Zacharias Sitchin to figure this out. Here's the rider on the bow. Nimrod was the great hunter, right? Well, who shows up? What's the description in the first seal? It's a rider on a white horse. He's got a bow, but no arrow. He's coming in peace. That's how Nimrod's been depicted in the past, right? So I just think that's chalk that up as interesting at a minimum, right? Then you get the winged disc, and this is again where I don't want to rely on pagan mythology to try and validate the Bible. We go the other way. The Bible speaks of the coming of, this Antichrist, and then these wars pouring out, and then, like I say in Revelation 6, the sun goes dark, the moon to blood, huge earthquakes, all that. Read Revelation 6 verses 16, 17 down in there. It could be this kind of a thing. And it's interesting that the pagans believe Nimrod, or whatever they want to call him, returns very soon. That's why they're setting up the triumphal entry arch and the Arch of Baal. They think he comes interdimensionally. And that's why a lot of people tie that back to what's going on at CERN. And he comes back, and there's this association with the sun and the sun disk, and it's winged. Well, is that this Nibiru thing that also is depicted as a winged planet because it's outgassing, this iron oxide is what people speculate. But boy, the symbol is sure carried forth from ancient Babylonia all the way forward, in these pagan views, the coming of Apollo, the coming of, Osiris. And you see it again, here's this winged disc and that same kind of, now these guys are looking at Anunnaki, but it's the same story. It's the return of Apollo, the return of Nimrod, and it's biblical. And I guess that's the point I'm trying to make is, and here is the Egyptian pyramid, but what does it have on it? The winged disc, same. So I don't know, Saints. I think there's plenty of smoke here, and I'm not saying it's fire yet, but we should definitely be looking up. And I just wanted to share with you potentially how the second Passover might fit into this whole story. God bless you, Saints. Hope to see you soon.